By what standard are these people being judged? Yahweh's standard? That's his law. The law has to apply to all these people if there's going to be a judgment against them, doesn't it? Like, what else could it be? Hey folks, welcome to Joel Reads Bible. I'm Joel and I read Bible so that you don't have to. And this is one of our super famous, they're famous at this point, that's right, recap episodes. We are recapping Deuteronomy chapters 1 through 10. That's right, the first Decalogue. Is that a word? If you spoke to somebody 10 times, would that be a decadialogue? Hey, Christians aren't the only ones that are allowed to have fun with words and make up new words and then just like redefine old words and all those things. Everybody gets to do it. Language belongs to all of us. Just some of us do it in a deceitful sort of way, and the rest of us like using words in fun ways. But I'm so excited because today marks a milestone where I'm getting so much closer to 10,000 subscribers, which is, of course, on my way to 1 billion subscribers. Thank you, everyone who's subscribed to the channel. We're so close to 1 billion, and it feels good. With that being said, let's get into our recap. We're going to find maybe a few contradictions, some really strange things when it comes to Christian doctrine, and who knows what else. And stay tuned. Wait, there's no reason to stay tuned to the end. Watch as long as you want, and if it's not interesting, just turn it off. There's no good reason to stay tuned to the very end. So in Deuteronomy chapter 1, we start with Moses doing a recap, and he does this actually for a lot of the chapters between 1 and 10. But in this first chapter, there's this slight contradiction, and you know I like to pick up on these little contradictions. What I'm beginning to do is kind of ignore them because there's so many little things that are contradictions that sometimes have like weak apologetics to excuse them, or like who cares at the end of the day, because we all know it's just a fictional story and there's like bigger fish to fry. But this little fish is where Moses, in around verse 9, he goes, "And I spoke to you at the time, saying, I am not able to bear you myself alone. Yahweh your God has multiplied you, and behold, you are today as the stars in the sky for a multitude." Now, of course, I mentioned at the time, they are far, far from being as many as the stars in the sky, but Moses doesn't know that. He's an illiterate shepherd in the olden days. So like people in Bible times didn't know how space works, right? So, but this is a contradiction because he basically says, I can't handle you guys, so I'm going to put a bunch of wise men in charge of you. That's what he says. He's like, I came to you, this is too much for me. So I'm just going to get these old wise men, and they're the ones that are going to be in charge of you. I'll make them heads over you. But if we go back to when this actually happened, right, which was Exodus 18, some of you who are following along with the channel, we read every single chapter of the Bible, will remember this event. Reuel came, or Jethro. It was Moses' father-in-law. He's called Reuel and Jethro. One of the contradictions. Anyway, he came, Exodus 18, verse 17. Moses' father-in-law replied, "What you are doing is not good. You and these people who have come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle this alone." And then he goes and he says, teach the instructions to a bunch of other guys and put other people in charge as judges and all the rest of it. Jethro comes up with this idea. He tells Moses he can't handle it. But over here in Deuteronomy, Moses is the one that says, I can't handle it. I'm not able to bear you all by myself. So you'll notice that's a little bit of a contradiction. It's like Moses is telling the story as if he came up with the idea himself. He's like, well, I thought it was a bit too much for me, so I decided that you guys wouldn't, and I came up with it. It's your father-in-law did that. You don't want to give him credit? A few verses later, in Exodus 18, he sends his father-in-law away. I mean, in that way, things haven't changed, am I right? Like, people, they're just not liking their father-in-laws. So in verse 18, It's interesting because Moses says, I commanded you at that time all the things which you should do. And then they describe traveling through the hill country of the Amorites as Yahweh our God commanded us. This isn't necessarily a contradiction. It seems on the face of it like, is Moses commanding it or is Yahweh commanding it, right? Because I feel like if Yahweh was the one that was commanding it, it would say, Yahweh commanded you at the time to do all the things which you should do, and then we travel there as Yahweh commanded you. That would seem more consistent. But instead we get, I commanded you as Yahweh commanded us. So what it's kind of doing, it seems, is making Yahweh and Moses one guy. Like it's making those two names kind of interchangeable when it comes to doing commands. It's like if Moses is going to command something, you can bet Yahweh's commanding it, right? And this is going to be the rule throughout Deuteronomy. The reason why this stuff is important, and of course this could be a contradiction unless you do say that, like, well, he was speaking on behalf of God, and that's shown here, right? So now it's not a contradiction. It's just anytime Moses is speaking, we can assume it's the voice of God. But Christians don't actually want to do that. That's why they call God's law the Mosaic law and not like Yahweh's law, because it's not Moses' law. Like, it's the law of Yahweh. It's Yahweh's words given through Moses. And it's a subtle distinction, but the thing is that for the Christian, a lot of these laws are really, really, really bad. So even when we get to Jesus, and Jesus says, Moses allowed divorce because of the hardness of your hearts. Of course, we haven't gotten to the divorce laws yet. Those are in Deuteronomy 24. But when Jesus says Moses allowed divorce because of the hardness of your hearts, people want to say, hey, see, Moses' law. Now, we will get there and we will see if God is not involved in those laws. Maybe this is all of a sudden Moses speaking on his own behalf. But what happens, even within these chapters, I think it's around chapter 5, and you'll see that when you actually watch the chapter, Moses is saying, these are the laws that God gave me. And all of the laws we've seen prior in the Torah are directly from God. And what we see in this passage again is Moses' commands are basically Yahweh's commands. They're the same thing. So the whole idea that Moses kind of gives his own laws, of his own free will, just like, well, these are the ideas that I had, it falls flat. Or, hey, look, this could be a contradiction. I don't mind. We could say that this is a contradiction. Moses claimed something that God actually claimed, and they are not interchangeable. It's like one or the other. That's fine. This is a contradiction then. So then we go to chapter number 2. And in Deuteronomy chapter 2, there is a verse which just like flies in the face of every Pharaoh hardened his own heart, free will apologetic you've ever heard. And it is verse 30. It says, but Sihon, king of Heshbon, would not let us pass by, for Yahweh your God hardened his spirit and made his heart obstinate, that he might deliver him into your hand as it is today. So Yahweh your God hardened his spirit. He actively hardened his spirit and made his heart obstinate. So what's your apologetic for that? Is it the same as the Pharaoh thing? Because in the Pharaoh thing, we have like so many hardenings, and he hardens his own heart. The heart just gets hardened automatically, or Pharaoh hardens his own heart. There's 3 options there throughout the story. Of course, the first one being God plans to harden his heart in Exodus chapter 4, right? But in this case, do we have time for all that hardening? Sihon doesn't have time to harden his own heart. What happens is the Hebrews go, can we go through? And he goes, no. And they go, well, you're dead. Right? So what you'd have to do is you'd have to look at the Pharaoh story, right? And you'd have to ignore Romans 9, and you'd have to go to the other, I think it's also in Romans, the passage that says God gives you over to your reprobate mind. And you have to say that obviously, because we're applying just that verse and not the Romans 9, we're ignoring Romans 9, why we're applying this verse to Pharaoh, we can extrapolate that and apply it to Sihon too. Like the same thing, even though the story's like completely different, that must just be what happened because that's what happened with Pharaoh. So that must be what happened with the other guy. Okay, but you're just making stuff up, right? Like you're just picking and choosing. You have to see that. This isn't some like deep, smart, philosophical, theological understanding of what's going on here. This is just like, well, this must be the thing because it can't be the other thing. Like we can't have it be the other thing. So like, well, like it has to be this thing. And what the text is telling me is that God planned to harden Pharaoh's heart, and then he did. Pharaoh did harden his heart once or twice. His heart also got randomly hardened out of the clear blue sky. And then God hardened this guy's spirit and made his heart obstinate so that God could have an excuse for the Hebrews to go in and kill them. That's literally what the text says. Like that's what the words are saying. And we also see a similar story with the blind man. This is God wanting to show off. We see it very obviously in Exodus 14 where like the Hebrews are away and then God's like, no, let's get Pharaoh all hardened again to go after them so that I can drown them in the Red Sea. Because he didn't have to do that. Like he could have just let them go, He could have just let the Hebrews continue and then let the Egyptians just mourn the death of their firstborns. But instead he's like, no, let's get them all jazzed up to do that again. And this is what it says in Exodus 14, similar to what it says in Exodus 4, is so that I can show my power. It's just God wanting to show his power so that the next generations can know, you can tell your kids. It's that kind of thing, right? And the story of Jesus and the blind man is very similar. It's like, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither of them. I just had this happen so that I could show off. So I could spit in the mud and rub it on his eyes and he could be healed. Nobody had to sin. It's just like my show-off thing. Same thing with Sihon, king of Heshbon. Let's harden him so that we can go and we'll deliver him into your hands. You guys can have the land. We can kill him. We'll have an excuse to do that, right? It's like, where else is he doing this? If you can take the thing that happens to Pharaoh and say, oh, then it happens here. Similar to the divorce thing, Moses allowed divorce. And so God also didn't like slavery. That was the heart hardening thing too. If you can pick and choose, then as soon as I can look at this and say, well, there was no self-hardening in this story, so God must have specifically hardened his heart. Now I can apply that to Pharaoh. I can also apply it to Canaan, right? I can also apply it to any of the people that the Hebrews, the Amalekites, God hardened their hearts to attack Israel. I can do it anywhere because it doesn't have to say the thing that happens in the specific story. I just have to create for myself through the text some sort of standard and then apply it to everything, right? That's what Christianity is. Is it just going, all right, well, this is obviously what's happening here. And now I'm going to apply it to all the things. You're presupposing the good God. So you're like, well, that couldn't be the case. I'm not presupposing that. I'm reading the text for what it actually says. He's claiming those things to show his power. Well, if he's going to show his power by letting the Hebrews win because Moses raises his hands when the Amalekites attack, then he must have hardened the Amalekites to come down and attack the Hebrews. Okay, I can see that. I can see that. So that he could show his power when he tells the Hebrews to go kill their children. I can see that for sure. Yep. Yeah. And how he hardened the Canaanites so they would kill their kids so that there would be an excuse to go and kill all of them too. Yeah, that could be. Yep. It's in the text. And this should worry a Christian because I have more of the text on my side. It's what it actually says, right? You're making stuff up. I even have New Testament to back me up. Romans 9, right? God is hardening who he wants to harden for his own purposes. He makes vessels for destruction. You're choosing your own adventure. You're cobbling your doctrine together to make it like the best case scenario. And in doing that, you're setting certain precedents that are kind of shooting yourself in the foot, because now I can do that to show that God is a monster across the board. Anyway, it's just all fun because we're just bickering over a stupid fairy tale book that's all made up anyway. But you can see how like it doesn't make sense to do it one way and not the other. It's just that you have a presupposition to protect. And so you sort of like mold the clay of the text into whatever it is you want it to say. And that's just, I would say, dishonest. And I know that the regular Christian isn't being dishonest, but the apologist is. And the person that probably claims to be a theologian. I mean, chapter 3 mentioned giants again, and there's always this mention of giants being so big and the enemy being big and scary, and they're all over. Like every single group of people that isn't the Hebrews, the small, innocent, sweet Hebrews, the weak little Hebrews, everyone else is a big towering giant except for them, and they have to overcome. And of course, they have the God on their side. And that's their story. It's overcoming something that is bigger and greater than them, which is inspirational. But it's also a little bit, there's also something that may be a little bit generic. What came to mind for me was the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. I'm going to be posting a video in the next few days about typology, where I'm going to extrapolate on this a little bit more. But the story of Jack and the Beanstalk does predate the Bible. It's older than the Bible. And yet there are similarities in the kind of foolish Jack character and the overcoming giants sort of story that happens. And it's not a one-for-one necessarily, but it's not unlike, right? And you can just sort of see how storytelling progresses and where maybe certain inspiration could come from. But again, we're going to go into that more in this next video where I will be debunking typology. That's going to be the main point of the video. But I will talk a little bit about the Jack and the Beanstalk element. So then we get chapter 4, and chapter 4 speaks a lot, and this has happened previously, but it talks a lot about tell your children that this is why we do this. Tell your children about the laws and the ordinances. Tell your son, and tell your son to tell their son's sons. You know, and they keep on reiterating this. And this is the priest class making sure that the new generation is indoctrinated into this theocracy. That's all that's happening there. And this has been something that has continued. It happened in my family. It'll continue to happen in other Christian families, and I'm sure Jewish families, all these families that believe these cults. It's built into the text to indoctrinate your children, indoctrinate your children, indoctrinate your children, just to keep this thing perpetuated. You have to stop indoctrinating your children. Please, just stop it. Just don't tell them. Just keep it a secret. Let it die. Let it die with you. And if no one worships God, we'll see if the rocks really do cry out. And if they do, we can all, turn around and start worshiping again. But when they don't, we can go, okay, yeah, that wasn't true either. And we can move on with our lives. So I'm not really sure if I mentioned this at the time, but I really want to reiterate it because this is a really important verse. And it's verse 14. It says, Yahweh commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and ordinances that you might do them in the land where you go over to possess it. So that means that the laws we learn in Exodus and Leviticus, which come down from Mount Sinai within like 2 years, right? Because then they start traveling in Numbers. And there's a few other rules and stuff that come out of the stories in Numbers. But for the most part, the laws are in those 2 books. And I think we're going to get more laws in Deuteronomy. And again, I think that they're going to be like, these are also what God told Moses on Mount Sinai. So we're just kind of breaking up the laws with story, which is really cool, and it's really nice of them to do that. But these laws are given in the first 2 years. Then there's that little whoopsie where the Hebrews are afraid. They're scared of the giants. They trust the bad report that those guys give. And God says, none of you who are standing here today will be getting to the land of Canaan. None of you are going into the promised land. You'll all be dead. And then there's going to be a whole new generation. And he sees to that throughout Numbers, where he's constantly killing thousands of them. I think a lot of them must have died of old age and things like that, because I don't know how many he killed, but he didn't kill 600,000 men. I don't know if it's just the fighting men or the full 2 million of them. But either way, piles of them die. All the men, at least, all the men that are the ones who would be doing the laws that are being given. And then a whole new generation is starting. So by the time we get to Canaan, the people who are actually going to enact these laws, they weren't the ones that heard the laws initially when Yahweh gave them to Moses. So whenever you hear the slavery apologetic, that slavery was what was going on at the time, sure, maybe it was something that was going on in all the surrounding villages and towns and tribes and nations. So was worshiping other gods. But what was happening with the Hebrews is they had a separate set of laws that were separating them, making them holy like Yahweh is holy, right? These are brand new people who are born in a wilderness. They're, as far as I know, not interacting that much with other people. Sure, the Moabite or Midianite women, they come in and sleep with them a little bit and such. But there's no good reason to be like, oh yeah, they're totally like engaging with literally everyone, and they're picking up on all the surrounding cultures and bringing that into their own. And so like they're going to do slavery because they're already kind of doing slavery. And so God has to regulate it. That's all nonsense. Like your apologetic is undermining the biblical narrative, right? You're kind of like trying to appeal to something real in order to fix the problems with the narrative, but the narrative doesn't want that to happen. The narrative isn't supporting your apologetic. The narrative is saying a whole new group of 2 million Hebrews went into Canaan and at that point started doing slavery, right? Like that's what's happening. You get what I'm saying? This is in an effort to kind of debunk and show how silly that slavery apologetic of they were doing it and so God had to regulate it. That's not true. These are brand new laws, all of which are going to start being followed 40 years after they're given in the land of Canaan to a bunch of fresh-faced 40-year-old and under Hebrews. So then we read verse 28 and 29, which we'll read it again. There you will serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But from there you shall seek Yahweh your God, and you will find him when you search after him with all your heart and with all your soul. So this could be a prophecy about the Babylonian exile. That would be a reasonable connection to make. But we know that this book is compiled, redacted, written, created, came out, was released around that time. So it's not a prophecy. It's kind of like this is them saying, now this is what happened to bring us to this point. This is our history. So it's retroactively kind of saying what would have been a prophecy, right, in this fictional tale. And that would probably be very cool for like the Hebrews of the time to hear or read, just be like, oh man, that did happen. That was true. That was accurate to our experience, right? And this is what the book will continue to do. It will do that throughout the whole entire thing. It'll write things after things happen, describing them happening. This one is maybe the first one that comports with some sort of real thing that has happened to them, and now they're sort of like prophesying to it, and that sort of thing. Like I know that will happen in Ezekiel as well, I'm thinking of Ezekiel where he prophesies the destruction of Tyre. Like that's the same thing where it's like they're talking about it like it's going to happen, but it's already happened, or it's like literally happening when they're sort of writing it. So this is kind of the first time that seems to happen, but it's just going to be like a rule for Bible. That's just how they write things, which is very, very clever. It's just like a cool thing for I'm sure for the reader or listener of the story. So then we got to Deuteronomy chapter 5, and it brought up something from, I think, back in Numbers. I had made a comment and turned it into a short clip where I'm talking about Yahweh using his name in the third person, speaking of himself in the third person, and how that's, I don't know, silly or narcissistic or maybe even just like fictional in the sense that like it wasn't Yahweh, obviously. It was just like someone else wrote it. But a lot of Christians came out of the woodwork. And I find when I do a short about something that's relatively petty and just like an aside, I just like throw the video out there, Christians love to jump on it. When it's something with a little bit more substance, it's harder to deal with. They can't handle that. So they like to pick on the little silly arguments that I make, which are just like observations more than anything. We get the 10 Commandments reiterated, I suppose, in Deuteronomy chapter 5. And it says, "You shall have no other gods before me." Me being Yahweh. Okay, that's now in the first person. "You shall not make any carved images of yourself, not bow down to them, or serve them, for I, Yahweh your God, am a jealous God." So then that's still I, first person. But then the third one, "You shall not misuse the name of Yahweh your God, for Yahweh will not hold him guiltless who uses his name." So now we're like settled right into third person, which is like Yahweh speaks of himself in third person, guys. Like he does that. He even flip-flops. And this continues. "Observe the Sabbath day, keep it holy, as Yahweh your God commanded you." Right? Like, therefore, Yahweh your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Yahweh your God brought you out of there by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Like, the rest of it's all in third person. He loves speaking of himself in the third person. So what it seems like to me is that they started writing it as if Yahweh was the one that was saying it. Like this is Yahweh. And then they just like transitioned into them saying it. Remember Yahweh, because then they can read it and instead of going, "I, Yahweh," they can just go, "Yahweh, your God did this," right? It just makes more sense that they would write it not in the first person because it's not the first person. They're not Yahweh. But then it says, "Yahweh spoke these words to all your assembly on the mountain." So it seems a little bit petty, but like we all know he's a horrible communicator. We all know that he's the author of confusion. But as an author, you would know, be consistent with your persons, right? Like third person, first person, like at least be consistent. Be consistent with your tenses. Be consistent with things like using the written out number 3 or like the digit 3. Like those are the things you want to be consistent. And God doesn't change and he is immutable. And yet within one list of laws, he flip-flops from first person to third person. And I know that this is petty, but at the same time, if it were true, and that's the part where like all I'm doing is saying, if it were true, if Yahweh said this, right? If it came out of his mouth and he were perfect, he'd be consistent. He would be like, "Yahweh says, you shall have no other gods before Yahweh." At least it would be always third person. So what I want is I want a book written by some sort of theologian to tell me why God flip-flops when it comes to which person he uses in these sentences. Because there must be a brilliant reason why a perfect God would flip-flop. Unless that's how you should do it. I mean, that's the other thing to say. Like, when like you say that's not good, and it's like, what's good? It's whatever God decides is good. Like, I guess that could be the apologetic. There, I fixed it for you. So then we get down to verse 24, and there's this whole like God speaking from the middle of the fire, from Mount Sinai, I suppose. Moses makes this claim. He goes, "And you said, behold, Yahweh our God has shown us his glory and his greatness, and we have heard his voice out of the middle of the fire. We have seen today that God does speak with man, and he lives." So it's kind of like if you're being told this or reading this when it's being written, and it's a story of the past, the story is kind of like making a claim. It's making the claim that many, many people, like 2 million people, 600,000 men, whatever, saw and heard Yahweh. It didn't see Yahweh, but saw that he exists because they heard his voice from out of the fire. And they were just so scared. They were like, this is going to kill us. You take care of it. We don't want to deal with this, which is a way of like putting the leaders in charge and not having to deal with dissenters or other people wanting to talk with Yahweh or whatever. But what it also is doing is it's kind of like doing an evidence for Yahweh. It's a written testimonial evidence. It's like the New Testament's 500 witnesses. This is an evidence that Paul is using to like convince you guys that this actually did happen. This is already going on here in the Old Testament. I'm sure it's based on this, but there's so many movies and shows and things where they have a religious leader and they're doing this kind of rhetoric, right? They're saying that these things were seen and felt and believed, whatever. And they always seem really weird and sketchy, and crazy. And when I was a Christian, I would watch those. I wouldn't see myself as the pathetic, gullible follower. I would just be like, that's a crazy guy, and those are crazy people following this cult guy. And the guy in the movie isn't like even a Christian. It's like some other culty thing. You know what I mean? That's not us. Ours is true. But it's the exact same sort of thing. You heard the voice coming out of the fire. You saw that God lives. It's like, oh yes, worship. It's the same kind of crazy culty nonsense that convinces gullible people to follow this crazy cult. In an old movie, you go, that's crazy. They're believing anything that these crazy cult leaders want to throw at them. These are dumb people. I've got technology. I've got rich philosophical arguments to support my belief. But it really is truly as thin as it's ever been, honestly. It really is. There's no difference. There's tons of evidence against this religion. There's tons of great arguments against all the stupid philosophical arguments, which are just making up something, guys. Like, it's just, again, like the word theology is so silly because it's really just like fairy taleology, right? Like the in theology is just not real. And it's just like inventing that thing and then attaching all sorts of attributes on it and then arguing for those attributes. Like, you could do that literally about anything. You can make anything up if you want. You just have to make up an answer because it doesn't have to have any evidence. It doesn't have to be supported by any sort of reality. Like, it's make believe, guys. You can do it. You can do whatever you want. But if you claim to have 500 witnesses, now it's all of a sudden more true because you've claimed that. And that's the same thing here. That's what Moses, the character of Moses, is doing in this passage. He's saying, you all saw this, so you should believe it. And give us money. So it's in chapter 5 that we get the reiteration that Yahweh is giving all these laws to Moses. Christians try to distance themselves from the laws. They try to, like, every way they can, bend over backwards, do all sorts of mental gymnastics so that they don't have to adhere to Yahweh's law, the words that come out of Yahweh's mouth. Jesus and Christians undermine this whole narrative, which is that Yahweh's giving them to Moses. So did Jesus get that wrong, or is this wrong? Which one's wrong? Because if this is wrong and like, hey, Moses didn't even exist, if you don't take this literally, as a lot of Christians do not take this literally, which is smart because it's nonsense, then can we believe any of it? Because Jesus said Moses gave these laws. So Moses did literally exist, which kind of puts the whole Jesus thing into questionable territory. It makes it a little bit less believable. Not that it's not already completely unbelievable. And then he says Moses gave the law as if God didn't give the law. We need Moses to exist and for things he says to be true. And what he's saying here is that Yahweh is giving him these laws. Christians are in a bit of a double bind, it seems. Either Jesus is right and Moses gave the laws, and then therefore the Torah is wrong, or the Torah is right and then Jesus is wrong. But then if archaeology and like reason and all those things are right, and Moses never existed because it's a ridiculous story, and none of this happened, but it's just a bunch of people that wrote it in like 500 and something BCE, then Jesus is wrong. Is it a triple bind? And then maybe Jesus doesn't exist and Jesus is a fictional character, and then we can throw the whole thing out. Yeah, dump the book. I think at this point, just dump the book. And then we get to chapter number 6. We got to go straight to verse 5 because this is a massive, I would say, problem for Christians, but like a huge verse, right? This is the greatest commandment that suddenly appears in one paragraph, and if you didn't know it, you'd miss it. You'd breeze right past it. It says in verse 5, you shall love Yahweh your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. It's not celebrated. It's not highlighted. It's not in its own little space necessarily. It's just part of a paragraph. And what is it referencing, right? Because it's stated as part of a greater point, right? There's something else that's happening in this narrative, which isn't just to love God. It's telling you how you're supposed to love God. Loving God is the motivation to do something. It's expressing how important the laws are, which happens in the previous paragraph. It's all about the laws. Up until this point, it's all been law, 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 law. And this is part of that rhetoric. And it's so weird to imagine that Jesus, who I think the writers of the Gospels are like placing Jesus into this story. They're bringing him and Yahweh together, which is like a cool move that they're doing that, right? But for Christians to then want to like rip that apart and be like, no. What he's saying when he says this greatest commandment, which is, again, rhetoric in order to underpin the importance and value of following the law, to use that rhetoric to distance yourself from the law, like I can't think of anything more ridiculous. Like it's such a dumb move. Like just imagine an immutable God. This is a God that never changes. He never changes his mind. He's going to say, love the Lord your God after saying, follow my commands, follow my commands. You know how much you follow? You've got to love me and follow my commands. Write the word of God, write the word of Yahweh on the backs of your eyelids, basically, so that you can read them and remember to follow my statutes and ordinances, right? For that God to turn around and be like, ignore all that, just do this thing, just love me, whatever that looks like for you, and then love your neighbor, whatever that looks like for you. What? That seems very counterintuitive, incredibly counterintuitive. But I get it. If I was a Christian, I'd want to distance myself from this stuff too. We're going to read some really bad stuff in Deuteronomy. We've already read some really bad stuff in Exodus and Leviticus. Of course, you're going to want to distance yourself from that. Of course, you're not going to want to stop eating bacon. Of course, you're going to want to have your barbecue shrimp. Of course, you're not going to want to worry about mixing fabrics and milk and meat. Of course, you're going to want to pretend like the slavery laws didn't apply to anyone and they were just like, if you have to do slavery, I don't know. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. Christianity is such a joke. It should not have tried to rip off Judaism. Just start your own cult, guys. This is not working for you. So then we get to chapter 7. And in chapter 7, we see verse 6. It says, "For you are a holy people to Yahweh your God." Which, why are they holy? It's because they follow the law, by the way. And the law includes slavery. Anyway, Yahweh your God has chosen you to be a people for his own possession above all peoples who are on the face of the earth. Above all peoples. Above all peoples. Above all peoples, right? In Deuteronomy 10:17, which we don't really have anything to talk about with Deuteronomy 10 now. "For the Lord your God is the God of gods, Lord of lords, the great God, almighty and awesome, who shows no partiality and accepts no bribes." No partiality, but he's chosen them to be his possession above all peoples. No partiality, above all peoples. That's a contradiction, folks. That's a contradiction. It's like they don't expect us to read the whole thing, which I think a lot of Christians don't. But like, you are partial to them if you're going to put them above all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. Like, that's just a no-brainer. Verse 16 says, "You shall consume all the peoples whom Yahweh your God shall deliver to you. Your eye shall not pity them. You shall not serve their gods, for that would be a snare to you." So this is not pity them. Really bothered me when we read that chapter. You shall not pity them. I'm like, oh, that sucks. It's just like, kill your empathy. Kill your empathy. This is not something that like we read in the Bible and just stays there. It's not just sitting on the shelf. This lives in human beings today. It lives in Christians. And I've seen it firsthand because I had a conversation with a Christian one time. And I was showing them that Joseph essentially caused slavery. And I would blame Yahweh, of course. Yahweh created a nation full of slaves in Egypt, and even all of the orchestrating he did to get Joseph there and everything ultimately put the Hebrews into slavery as well. But I showed this to this Christian acquaintance of mine, and I was just like, see, look, God, because he did the famine and all that, caused this slavery. Whole nation full of Egyptians, slaves to Pharaoh. And this person paused for a moment and took a second, just like, you can see the like wheels spinning, kind of trying to figure out, okay, what's a way out? What's a way out? And then they said, oh, they were worshiping other gods. All of Egypt, every single Egyptian, every single one of them, deserving of slavery, giving their grain, most of their grain to Pharaoh and keeping just enough for them to survive for themselves. A whole nation full of slaves deserving because they were worshiping other gods. Lack of empathy, right? No pity. Humanity killed, right? All of this internalized by the member of the cult today in 2025. And I know they don't think we're speaking about real people, right? But they'll apply it to real people. They'll apply it to real people. Just wait, if they see a tsunami and they think that the people there that are being tsunami don't worship God, they can apply that to them for sure. So the evil rhetoric of the Bible is alive and well, and that's why we need to destroy the cult. So then we move on to verse 22. Yahweh your God will cast out those nations before you little by little, so you may not consume them all at once, lest the animals of the field increase on you. So in episode of chapter 7, I went on a bit of a diatribe about how limited God is. Like, oh, God's so limited, he can't do all of these things for these people. He can't just like boop them into the thing or make the ground so lush or do all those things. And what I was trying to get across, the message that I really want people to like kind of hear, is that the reason why they can't do that in the narrative is because it can't happen in real life. Their God won't do that, right? Their God will be with them in battle. That can happen in real life because it's just something you believe, like it's something in your head. Yahweh will go ahead of you as a consuming fire. Well, we're not going to see him. He's not actually going to be there, but you can feel that, and that can inspire you, and you'll go to battle and you'll fight and you'll kill and you'll die believing that, and it'll make you more brave. It'll make you put yourself out there more. So that's all that is. If God was saying like, I'll solve every single problem with magic anytime you want, well, we could see that that's not true, and we could go, oh, that God can't exist, so this is all fiction, end of story. But if we have it like specific for a specific group of people, and he does limited things, he does small things, sometimes big things, but they're big in the sense of like, you are not going to expect it ever again. It's not like your regular thing, right? Although I think something like manna from heaven would be something that when there's a whole nation of starving people, like in one of these developing nations, is like, well, just send manna to them, you know? Why are you not doing that? But there still has to be this limitation of what he can do. He's not going to go kill everyone for you. You have to do the killing. He's not real. He's not going to do that. We need the guy to do that, you know? He's not going to give you food the way he does with the manna thing, but he's going to make your crops fine, you know? Not over the top, not anything extra necessarily. It's just like what you would expect, but if you don't do it, then you're, you know what I mean? Which also doesn't happen, which is nice, you know? So this is a clever way of doing sort of like a call to battle, to be like, God will be with you, but you still have to do it. It's going to be bit by bit, but have patience. We're going to get there. God's on your team. Let's go, rah, rah, rah. The problem is when the Bible does show a little bit too much hubris, I guess we could call it. Sometimes it says stuff like in verse 15, Yahweh will take away from you all sickness, and he will put none of the evil diseases of Egypt, which you know, on you, but lay it on people who hate you. Well, that's not true. Like you can love God, and you could even like try to follow all his laws and be as holy and righteous as possible. You're still going to get sick. We all know really great Christians, faithful Christians who, you know, have gotten like really bad diseases, cancer, you know, MS, all these other things, because this is just not true. So you say these things, and then there's got to be excuses. He's testing us. We're going to do this excuse. We're going to do that excuse. You know, we got to fill the holes of this boat, you know, because this is ridiculous. It's not working. And then you can go to John 14:14 that says, you can ask for anything in my name and I will do it. I mean, that is absolutely ludicrous, right? Like that's absolutely not true. And so there's like a million apologetics, people arguing, trying to get their way out of this. It's not true. It's not what he means. You can't ask anything in his name and he will do it. Like honestly, you can't ask literally anything in his name and he will do it. Not anything. It's like you can ask anything. You can't ask anything. Like there's nothing you can ask that he will do. So in verse 22, they thought ahead. They're like, we still need soldiers. We can't have God do everything. But in verse 15, they said something that I don't think made that much sense, because what happens when they all get sick and they're like, wait a second, God said this wasn't going to happen. So in chapter 8, we get verse 3 that says, he humbled you, allowed you to be hungry, and fed you with manna, which you didn't know, neither did your fathers know, that he might teach you that man does not live by bread only, but man lives by every word that proceeds out of Yahweh's mouth. So I kind of mentioned this at the time, and I just really want to lean into it more. I want to talk about the context of this verse. Like, this verse exists in the specific context of the Torah, which is all the laws. The Torah, they are the laws, guys. Like, that's the book with some stories scattered in there. And the stories are great. The stories are really important to like the foundation of Judaism and of course Christianity. But the book is the law. So that's not what you want it to mean. Like when I was a Christian, and I know a lot of Christians, I'm sure, feel the same way, that this is something that's said by Jesus. And once you give it to Jesus, it's kind of like this nice thing. Every word that comes from God, but it's like, be good to the orphan. You know what I mean? All the nice things, all the pretty things, the Beatitudes, right? The problem is that he's saying it's out of Yahweh's mouth. Jesus doesn't come into play, right? It's the Father and his law. His words don't give life, guys. His words give death. If you read these laws, they are laws which the punishment is death. Like, if you don't do this, you're going to die. If you don't listen to Moses or the priests, I'm going to kill you. Those aren't laws sometimes. Sometimes they show that with an object lesson. But all of this stuff is death, death, death. That's Yahweh. Yahweh is the God of death. He sends the bears to maul the kids, right? He sent his son to die. He didn't have to do that. He set the wages of sin as death. He didn't have to do that either. Yahweh equals death across the board, okay? You just have to accept that. Every word that comes out of the mouth of Yahweh, all right, I'm going to be kind and say not every word equals death, but they don't all equal life, and tons of them do equal death. If we strip this of all its context and pop it into the New Testament and talk about turning rocks into bread and have Jesus trying to withstand temptation, fun story, cool callback, Christ. But if we actually see where this verse exists, it's not what any Christian wants it to be saying. It's not the context any Christian wants to adhere to. So then dump the book. So then in chapter 8, I did this diatribe about pomegranates. And there's probably a lot of people that love pomegranates and are like, F you, Joel, with the pomegranates. And it was like a joke diatribe, you know. And I say pomegranates are purple, but they look, I guess, reddish. I don't know. What color would you say they are? They're not entirely purple, but they're not entirely red. I just think of them as purple for some reason. But when I listened back to that part of the chapter, I was like, wait a second. This is kind of more true than I kind of gave myself credit for. Like, we have better fruits than pomegranates. You know, there's just like tons of really great fruit going on. If this is the best that Yahweh has to offer, have you heard of mangoes? I know I kind of touched on this a little bit, but like, if you're going to give them fruit, like apples are good. I think the vines mean grapes probably. I feel like pomegranates is just not a great fruit. They couldn't think of another fruit because they didn't know about them. But if Yahweh was truly God, I think he would have gone with like mangoes. I think maybe mangoes are my favorite fruit. I don't know. But like, what about watermelon or honeydew melon? Any of the melons. Like, people love melons, you know? But instead it's pomegranates. That's not divine. Like, if you're going to think of any divine fruit, any fruit that you think, hey, I'm going to make a promise to you, you're going to have this fruit. Is pomegranate the first one you think of? Or if it's like sliced apples with caramel, you know what I mean? Like, when I did the diatribe, I was joking, and I'm not like super serious right now. But the fact that that's all that they could think of shows that it's people writing this of a time. It has nothing to do with God. Because if God truly existed and was going to bless them with fruit, it would not be a pomegranate. That's the last one. That's such a ridiculous fruit. It'd be a mango. And then this is just a really quick, I think, contradiction in verse 15. Who led you through the great and terrible wilderness with venomous snakes and scorpions and thirsty ground where there was no water. Who poured water for you out of the rock of flint? This is so funny because I get a lot of pushback from Christians when I go, hey, God shouldn't have killed these people because they needed a drink of water. And they're like, well, there was water. He did give them water, but they were rebellious. It's like, no, they wanted water. And so because they wanted water, he sends them snakes to kill them. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is a cruel God. This is a rude God. He's obnoxious, right? It's more like keeping people in line and saying, don't request too much, don't want too much. Okay, it's just rude, just obnoxious, right? But if you're on the side of God, you're going to bend over backwards to make him the good guy. But he's not. He's the bad guy. This one is saying hey, there's a terrible wilderness with no water. Yeah, that's his fault. He didn't give you water. And venomous snake. You sent the venomous snakes. What are you talking about? That they're not just there. You did that. And scorpions. That's the contradiction. I don't remember any scorpions. I think that's new information. Where were there scorpions? Do you remember scorpions? I don't think there were any scorpions. Anyway, God sent the snakes. Don't just say there were snakes there. God did it. So then we get to chapter 9, and we have a reiteration of more giants. Verse 2, a people great and tall, the sons of Anakim, whom you know and whom you've heard. It's who can stand before the sons of Anak? They're very tall. It kind of talks about that. I don't know if it goes on about it, but they're the giants, right? And all these mentions of giants made me think about that bad report that was supposed to be hyperbolic. There are giants. Look at the giant grape clusters. Giants, giants, giants. And it's you're trying to scare them. The Nephilim, they're eating people. It's what? I don't know. What is hyperbole? There are giants. They keep on mentioning it. This is fact. So are the giants not as tall as they mentioned? Or the grapes were real? Were they not cannibals? Or was the report totally true? And God was just I just don't like that you guys are questioning things, and I don't like that you guys are afraid, so I'm going to kill you for that. Anyway, that's Numbers 13. It's very confusing for me, and I just thought I'd bring that up real quick. So then we get to verse 4, and it says, don't say in your heart after Yahweh your God has thrust them out from before you, for my righteousness Yahweh has brought me into the possession of this land. Because Yahweh drives them out before you because of the wickedness of these nations, not for your righteousness or for the uprightness of your heart. So this is a huge question, is what is wickedness? What is righteousness? What is being upright? What do any of these words mean? Do they correspond with sin in any way? Is being wicked being sinful? Is committing sins wicked? Are all these words interchangeable? And do we understand them as a coherent sort of narrative? The reason why I'm asking this question is because sin, according to the Bible, is transgression of the law. Right? Do not sin. Do not do the things that go against what Yahweh has commanded, his statutes and his ordinances. The way you're holy, the way you're righteous, the way you're set apart is by following the law, right? Not following the law is sin. If you have done one of these sins, or you think you've done a sin, or you're not sure if you've done a sin, kill an animal. That's going to be a sin offering to atone for your sin. So now these people, they are wicked. They are sinning. They're doing something wrong. What they must be doing wrong is not following the law, right? They're not doing the statutes. They're not doing the ordinances. And then they're not obviously atoning for those things. And one of the main laws that they're, I'm sure, breaking is that they're worshiping other gods. That's law number 1, right? Don't have any other gods before me. That's a big law. All of this is just to point out that when anyone tells you that the slavery laws and the horrific misogynist laws and all the other laws about burning women alive and stuff like that were just for the Hebrews, just at a particular time, why are these people being called wicked? Because they don't have the law. They're not under the law. What's wicked if it's not following the law? I don't understand what the rule is here. What's the system? Who's supposed to be following the law and who isn't? Does the law apply to these other people, or does it only apply to the Hebrews? And if it doesn't, by what standard are these people being judged? Yahweh's standard? That's his law. The law has to apply to all these people if there's going to be a judgment against them, doesn't it? Like, what else could it be? Is God's law separate from his morality? Is that how that works? And so they're against Yahweh's morality and they're wicked by Yahweh's standards. And these laws, which some of them are just downright evil and wicked themselves, are just for these people who are allowed to be evil for a while before God's real morality takes effect. What's going on with this stupid book, guys? How does it work? Why can no one articulate it? I'll tell you why. Because it's all over the place. It's just like there's too many books and they've canonized too many books. They should have just like taken two or done one of the gospels. They just go, we follow this one gospel. They bit off more than they could chew. It just doesn't work as one big thing. Anyway, chapter 9 is really funny. It reads like a guilt trip. Moses keeps on going like, I was starving for like 40 days and 40 nights just so that God would be nice to you. You guys did this. I did this for you, you know. And now you're going to give me a hard time. I'm always doing this for you. It's very funny. So go watch that chapter because it's really, really, really great. Now, of course, Deuteronomy chapter 10, we already spoke to the verse that I was going to talk about where God does have favorites. And I didn't think of anything else to mention for that chapter. So that's basically it, guys. This was a bit of a long one, and I apologize, but thanks for sticking it out. We'll be back in a few days for a video about typology, and I hope you enjoy that, where we'll be talking about Jack and the Beanstalk and other great biblical stories. Until then, subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.